Okay, so Stay Tuned, we'd like to talk to journalists, civic leaders, community leaders, politicians, and tonight we thought we'd have them all around one table. Let me do some introductions first, starting back at the table. You know him from last time, you love him, you hate him, you're not sure. Jason Rosenbaum, thanks for coming over. Also, Rena Hajat Carroll, Diversity and Awareness Partnership, thanks for being here tonight. Welcome back to the show, Joe Wilson, now with Better Together. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And Scott Ogilvie, also welcome back to the show, Alderman with the 24th Ward. Let's just kind of pick up where Jason and I were talking about, for instance, IKEA, some of the things that have been in the news. Just in this neighborhood kind of that we're in now, we've got several things being built. Is that an indication or give you any optimism about 2014?
Yeah, well, I mean, something I was talking about before is how, as a region, I think we probably should be a little more optimistic. I was talking with another guest, and we sort of coined a phrase, civic self-confidence. And I think we have the opportunity probably to express that more often in the coming years. As far as development goes, there is a ton of development happening through the Central Corridor in St. Louis right now, from downtown to Midtown, the Central West End, around Forest Park.
Let's take a few of those off, because we've got the IKEA that I think has gotten a lot of...
Have we mentioned that yet?
We have mentioned the IKEA.
We're getting an IKEA.
I'll tell you about it later. But also there are some high-rise apartment structures. We've got a Whole Foods is going to have some apartments on top.
Yeah, and those, really the housing, I think, is long-term. That's what's really critical, is we're building new housing. We're going to have a more diversified housing stock. The market, and this is really market-driven housing, there's a lot of demand, both for condos and rental units through the Central Corridor. And you know, developers now, post-recession, can get the financing and are pretty eager to build these things because they're profitable. You know, that's a vote of confidence in St. Louis. And that additional population that we'll get out of that, you know, I think there's a lot of benefits to be had there. The paradigm, maybe we'll talk about this later, but the paradigm for the sort of the residential neighborhoods of North St. Louis and South St. Louis is slightly different. Probably has more to do with education. But Central Corridor news, there's a lot of momentum there, and I think it's basically all positive.
So, Rena, if the boat is rising in the Central Corridor, is it rising for everyone?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I would say it is certainly beneficial for Central West End and our students. So if we talk about retention, which is I think a huge issue for this coming year, yes, you know, absolutely, students and young professionals are excited about IKEA. They're excited about Whole Foods. Are you excited?
I am.
So I think this is evidence, right? So, but if we talk about, you know, deep north, deep south, I think this is where we still have our diversity issues to consider.
Well, yeah, I've said, I think a couple weeks ago, that while there's a lot of great things going on in St. Louis, it's still a divided city. I mean, and it's not even just north-south. There are parts of southeast St. Louis that have just as many problems with poverty and crime as the north side. I don't know if this Central Corridor development is kind of going to reach over into the north side, but one thing that will happen this year is the opening of the Mississippi River Bridge, which could naturally bring a lot of development to North St. Louis, just because there's going to be a high demand of cars going through that area. And you know, just the opening of this bridge, which has been years in the making, I think as far as just symbolically could be another source of civic pride for the region.
Civic self-confidence.
Yes, civic self-confidence.
Is that something that's happening? There's some skepticism already on Twitter tonight about whether what we're talking about when we keep beating the IKEA drum really means anything for anyone in North County, North City. Is there something happening there that can also be a source of civic self-confidence?
Paul McKee's North Side stuff is probably still just raising a lot of questions. There's still a lot of people who are very concerned about what's going to happen up there and whether things will actually happen up there. So I think that's probably, there's still some questions up there, and I don't know, civic self-confidence might be a little ways away on that front.
I think, you know, the reason why you know, a construction project or a company like IKEA is important, you know, they have a high profile that is going to be new tax revenue for the city. And when you get to, you know, what do people in North and South St. Louis care most about? I think it's more basic services, it's city services, it's educational opportunities. And when you have a more stable tax base, it does make it easier to put more attention on those sort of more basic things. And the city has, in some ways, the city has done a terrific job with its budget over the years, despite a declining population. We have a good credit rating, and we've continued to provide, I think, quality services. But definitely new economic activity, which these Central Corridor projects represent, will help us continue to do that and hopefully do it, I think, better in the future.
Something that definitely is close to home for folks in North St. Louis County is the issue of school transfers. Where do we stand with that in terms of how that impacts the community? How does the state of Normandy and Riverview Gardens, our two unaccredited schools that are transferring students to other communities right now, how much is that weighing on folks in North County?
Well, I think it should be a wake-up call, especially for people in St. Louis City. I heard Alderman Ogilvie on the radio a few weeks ago talking about how St. Louis City is kind of teetering on the edge of unaccreditation, and if the status quo reigns through with this law, then I think you could see a pretty substantial flow of students away from the city into the county schools. And if there's nothing to stop the capacity issue, I think it's going to make Riverview and Normandy look tame by comparison. So that's going to be, we'll probably talk about that later in the legislative session, but I think that is kind of the ticking time bomb in that particular situation, at least for the city.
Let me rephrase the question and say maybe what would you like to see, and not even just on that issue. Take the reins off of this conversation. What would you like to see in 2014 for St. Louis region?
I mean, from my perspective, and particularly in this education conversation, it's equal value for students of color, for students who have lower SES levels, and that's something that I think we're not doing a good job around. We are very clear about who we value and how we value them, and that's playing out with this Normandy issue we just saw yesterday, Normandy going bankrupt, and I think this is sort of reflective of how our region has been, and I think there's some opportunity to be a little more inclusive and really start addressing diversity head on instead of having it this notion. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
Will we have a city-county robust and legitimate conversation over re-entering the county for St. Louis City?
I really hope we have a robust conversation. I really would like to hear what people in St. Louis City and St. Louis County and all the municipalities have to say about how we all work together to get things done across the entire region. Better Together is really not trying to push for re-entry or the nuclear option, full merger, unification, all that stuff.
Joe, really?
It's a 501c3. They can't do it.
Well, okay, I will tell you.
We really aren't.
Well, another group thinks otherwise in that they have formed to oppose it. And I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just saying that might be indicative of how this conversation will go.
I understand. I'm very happy that people care enough to organize to do anything. Because I think for a very long time it was very easy to say, well, someone will take care of something in my community. Someone will take care of this. That's for someone else's. That's someone else's responsibility to take care of this. But it's good to take a microscope to these things every now and then and see, what is my little community doing? What is my? I live in I grew up in unincorporated South St. Louis County. There was stuff going on with South Point trying to incorporate and Green Park incorporating. I watched St. George disincorporate. It's very weird how portions of the community operate. And we should take a microscope to these things. We should look at these things, and there should be a degree of transparency that I don't know that it's been there for a long time.
Okay.